Welcome, everyone, to Zoom Into Books. Today, we are talking with award-winning author Patricia Miller. She is a novelist and has now written her first children's book, It's Okay to Have Feelings. It's the first in a series of mindfulness-building children's picture books called Peyton's Palace Adventures, which was just released by Headline Books. She is a licensed clinical counselor supervisor and licensed social worker with 35 years of experience. Patricia, welcome to Zoom Into Books today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy.
You're quite welcome. We're excited to hear about your new book. I know you write a lot of novels, and we'll ask you questions about that after a bit.
Okay.
But for now, please tell us a little bit about yourself and the story behind this series of children's books.
Yes, I would be happy to. So I actually have over 35 years of counseling experience. I simply just quit counting at 35. But over the course of my career, I have worked with all ages, from 5 to mid to late 80s. And 10 years ago, Cleveland Clinic hired me to develop a program or a curriculum for a program that they were starting called an intensive outpatient program. This is a program for adults, and it's for adults who maybe have been in outpatient therapy one-on-one, but it's just not intense enough for them to be functioning well. So if they're not functioning well in their everyday life, they then come to us. And as a result, I based this curriculum on what's called dialectical behavioral therapy, developed by Marsha Linehan. This type of therapy is very different than any other type of therapy that is out there because it's a skills training program. It takes the skills that are taught and the patients learn them and then they practice them, they tweak them, they use them, and then they come back and they report, and we keep doing that. It's sort of a wash and repeat kind of thing. So what happens is the adults are seeing that with this type of skills training, it's providing them that extra little different type of therapy that they didn't have before. And then when they go back into outpatient therapy or when they're done, they're functioning so much better and they're just happier in general. And this leads to the children's book because for the past, well, it took 6 years, 6 years in, and I decided we needed to do this because I kept hearing over and over again, why aren't we teaching these to our children? Why are we waiting until we're adults and that we're not functioning? And I took that very seriously and said, yes, you're right, we should be. I looked at the market and there are a lot of good mindfulness building books out there. Excuse me. But what makes mine different is that whole idea of foundational skills and those that build on those skills progressively. And what we're finding out as therapists is that we did a decent job over the years of teaching a skill here and there and in advising our patients to use them. But what we did not realize was missing was a critical piece, which was a practice piece. And then that comes to the subject of what's called neuroplasticity. And this is our brain's ability to learn and to grow and to change. And in order for that to happen, we have to practice. We have to do things over and over again. So think of it this way, Kathy. Think about our thinking patterns over the years and our behavioral patterns over the years. They're reinforced by consistent repetition over and over and over again. So if we have unhealthy thoughts, such as I'm no good, I don't deserve to be happy, and so forth, and we think those thoughts over and over and over again, they become embedded in our neural pathways. So what do we need to do? We need to grow healthier neural pathways that can take over the unhealthy ones. And the only way to do that is with repetition of healthy skills that encourage those healthy thinking patterns, those healthy behavioral patterns, those healthy ways of responding to stressors that is very different from what I did before. And that's the basis of this book. I took the skills that we teach in this program and I brought them down to a children's level and was able to, in book one, start with the foundational skills of mindfulness. And there are several of them. There are 9 different types of skills that you can practice for mindfulness, 9 major categories. And although I do have that taught in my book, I also intertwine into the storyline healthy perspectives or healthy ways of thinking about emotions to start the ball rolling, in that we don't have to think about feelings as being a bad thing. We can think about feelings as being a good thing and something that needs to be managed. So we go away from this whole idea that if I get angry, I'm a bad person. That is just completely wiped out with the storyline, that all emotions are an option. The important thing is that we learn to manage them. So one of the main tenets of the book, obviously, is the practice, the repetition, but there's a very important second one as well, that we need to be proactive. We need to teach our kids these skills early. That way they have them when they need them. Because let's face it, stress comes to all of us. It's inevitable. And we can't say, well, I'll just be there to help my child. No, we're not always going to be there for them. We're not going to be everywhere they are. We need to encourage independence with our children. We need to encourage and foster their ability to manage their own feelings on their own, which brings healthy self-esteem and self-worth. So the idea of teaching kids early, that way they have these skills, and we're practicing with them as well. And we're doing this on a regular basis so that it becomes a part of their everyday way of thinking. And then a stressor comes along and they'll handle it totally different than what they would without. And I'm living proof of that, because I'll have no problems sharing that when I was in 8th grade, I was hit really hard with social anxiety. At the time, nobody knew what it was. And I certainly didn't. All I knew is that it was really, really uncomfortable. And if it weren't for a teacher who was willing to take me aside and work with me a little bit, which teachers don't have time a lot of times to do anymore, she fooled me into realizing that it wasn't that I couldn't do things. It wasn't that I wasn't smart. It was that I was anxious. And that realization alone was huge. And I realized at that moment that this is not something that is just happening to me. This is happening to our children. So as I'm in this adult program, I'm thinking about this book. And so 4 years ago, I start developing it and start working on the storyline and start working on how to integrate the skills into the storyline. And in the meantime, what's happening? We're seeing our children need help more and more. The need for mental health has exceeded the amount of therapists that we have and the amount of psychiatrists we have that work with children. So we were also finding out that one type of therapy isn't for everyone. So in our program, we actually have outpatient therapists sending their patients to us to get these skills so that they can go back into outpatient and progress more. So the skills have been very vital. So if it's helpful for adults who find themselves in trouble emotionally and mentally later in life, why are we not instilling these in our children early? And that's the second premise of my book.
I was just going to say, I think this is as beneficial to adults as
Mhm.
it is to children. Do you have
Yes.
a specific age group the book is targeted for?
Yes, I would say 5 to 8, but it could go as far as 10, depending upon the developmental age of it.
Yeah.
With me, if I was using the book with the children, it would be 5 to 10 is what I would do.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's a great point. As you said, there's a lot of adults. Fortunately, most of them seem to be running the country.
Well, let's face it. I mean,
Can't handle big feelings.
right, right. And when I go over to the hospital, when I say over, because our program is in an outbuilding of the hospital of Cleveland Clinic Union Hospital. When I go over and I ever do presentations or interact with adults over there, they see my badge and they see where I work, and they jokingly say, "You might see me there someday." And I look straight at them and say, "Would be perfectly fine if you would need help." We've actually had a large number of employees come through our program, a large number. So it's important to realize that, yes, there's a lot of adults that need help out there. And it's great that there's programs such as the one that I work in that helps those adults. But they inevitably say, "Man, I wish I would have had this earlier. I wish I'd had this earlier." So this book is constructed so that parents can use it, teachers can use it, therapists can use it. I'm really excited for therapists to dig into it, because when they're trying to take the skills that are taught to adults and bring them down to children, it's a very challenging thing to do. I've had several therapists ask me, what would I start with if I was doing this? I'm working with children. What would I start with? And so it took a lot of thought over the last 4 years to make sure that I was bringing these skills to children in the right order, in the right manner, and also educating the adults who are going to be using these with their children on how to do it.
So tell me again, how long have you been working with children on
So I
specific things?
Specifically with children, that's a good question. So I started, let's see, because I've worked with children at 3 different places. So I would say it has to be over 15 years that I worked with children. And
Great.
at
So
one, oh, go
do you
ahead.
follow up with them? I mean, have they learned how to handle their feelings and situations?
So unfortunately, at the time I was working with the children, this type of therapy wasn't around. It wasn't something that was in our area. What's interesting is that when we opened our program 10 years ago, you wouldn't have found a therapist whose biography included DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. And in the past 10 years, we've seen it explode in our area. It is now very common. We know exactly which ones to link our patients to afterward that can help them continue on. So back in the day when I was working with children, it was cognitive behavioral therapy, which is still the not, 99.9% of what therapists use today. And maybe if I can explain this a little bit, cognitive behavioral therapy is the umbrella, and DBT is one type that sits below it. So when Marsha created this, Marsha Linehan, she took the whole concept of mindfulness and put it together with the best of cognitive behavioral therapy, and as a result, developed brand new skills. The first module is this big, and the second one was just as big. So it's exploding. It was in the bigger cities, but it wasn't in our smaller rural community back then. So I now work exclusively with adults, but my experience with the children is that I want them to be able to benefit from this new type of therapy. And I am close to a lot of therapists who do work with children. And that's what they're always, asking me. So how do I bring this to my children?
I think this is one of the most beneficial therapies I've ever heard of. Um,
Yes.
you know, it depends on your home life. It depends on whether you're outgoing or introverted. I think this is terrific. Would you like to show the book and
Yes,
give us kind of an idea how the book's laid out?
absolutely. So the book starts by introducing its main character as Peyton. And although Peyton is a very kind, sweet, lovable child, we also find that Peyton does get into trouble, as most of us have and do. And then she ends up having trouble managing her emotions, which again, I think we all can relate to.
Yeah.
And then as a result, she taps into a skill. And in her mind, she's able to create a magical castle that she goes to. And she introduces this castle to the children who are reading this book with an adult. She takes them with her to the castle, and she introduces them to the butler, Freddy Feelings, who then becomes the teacher. And he explains to her that feelings aren't good or bad, they just are. And that it's important to manage them. It's not that having anger makes us a bad person. It's justifiable at times, but it's how much anger and how much we let it overwhelm us. He explains this by showing her mirrors. I don't know if is that okay. And he shows her mirrors, like circus mirrors, that when we stand in front of them, it distorts our view of who we are. We get wiggly, we get tall, we get chubby or tiny. And just the same way as those mirrors distort our view of ourselves, certain thinking patterns also distorts not only our view of ourselves, but of others around us and situations and stressors that we encounter. And how important our thinking patterns are in coping. He introduces her to several royal children, Lady Louise and Sir Arthur, who also are nice people. They volunteer, but they have trouble with their emotions as well, helping children to feel it be normalized, that it doesn't matter who you are, how smart you are, we all suffer and we all struggle with the same emotions. And he goes on to teach her important things, such as with emotions all being important, there's a reason for every emotion. Fear is not one that we enjoy having, but it keeps us safe. Anger actually helps us to motivate us to take care of a problem. That's if our emotions are managed, they're helpful. It's when they get too large and out of control that they become unhelpful. And that leads to what a lot of us therapists call emotional dysregulation. So he talks about skills and teaches Peyton how to use them. And as a result, when she leaves the castle, she's then left with an important adult page, which is where the adults learn how to help their child, not just one time with these skills, not just teach them a skill and say, go use it. That's not going to work. And that's what a lot of our patients say when they first come in, is they'll try a skill and they'll say, it didn't really work. And we say, that's because you're just starting. You've just started. You have to practice it over and over again. Some patients, Kathy, when they come in, they say, we want to just, not do the practicing. We're going to use the skills, but we're not going to do the practicing. And I say, it's not going to work. It's not going to work because the old neural pathways are still too strong. You've got embedded negative thinking patterns and they become rigid. I know my mama raised a stubborn person herself, so they become rigid. And then what we do is we introduce a skill and we think we use it once and it's going to work. That's not going to work. So we have to practice. And that's why this last page is so crucial, because it provides the adults, whether it be parents, therapists, teachers, anyone working with children or loving children, they learn how to best benefit the child. They learn that with little bits of practice, 5 minutes, it's all it takes is 5 minutes a day. We recommend not to go over 10 because after that, you're really not doing anything. But 5 to 10 minutes a day of the practice of each of these skills that are introduced in this book, it begins to change our neural pathways. Our neural pathways start to develop into healthier ones. And then you've got the unhealthy ones and you've got the healthy ones. And as you use this one over and over again, this one starts to diminish. and this one takes over. And then that becomes their normal way of thinking, their normal way of responding to stressors. So the idea behind this is let's not wait until unhealthy patterns are developed and taking over. Let's teach it to our children young so they have a chance to continue with some healthy thinking patterns so that they may not get to the point that some of these adults get to. And if they start to, they'll at least have foundations to keep them, relatively under control. It's so exciting when a patient comes to us and they have some knowledge of the dialectical behavioral therapy skills, some knowledge, because they've already researched it. They know it's highly successful. We tell our patients not to Google. They like to Google and diagnose themselves, and it's extremely tempting to do. But if you're going to Google anything, Google the success rate of dialectical behavioral therapy, because then you realize, hey, this has been successful nationwide. And if it's successful nationwide, then it's probably something I might need to consider looking at. So getting patients to understand the importance of practice is very difficult, especially when you're adults and you've got a million things going on. And once they actually accept the fact that they have to practice daily, that's when the magic happens. That's when they start thinking a little differently, feeling a little differently. And that's when the skills start taking hold. Excuse
Well,
me.
that's terrific. And mental health has been so abused, maligned, not treated. I think this comes in at a very important time, particularly in a child's life,
Yes.
to allow them to develop friendships, meaningful,
Right.
productive relationships.
Right. Kathy, I think back to when it hit me. And not that I had loving, supportive parents. I was very, very fortunate. But I didn't have one skill. I didn't have anything. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that it was eroding my whole life. It was it was eroding my friendships. It was eroding the things I enjoyed doing, the extracurricular activities. It was eroding my ability to think in school. And as a result, a lot of low self-esteem started setting in. Because if you can't function in these environments, then you start thinking, well, I'm not as good as other kids. I'm not well, I'm not normal. And all sorts of unhealthy thinking patterns start taking over. And I was lucky, I was able to understand that it was the anxiety, and just understanding that it was an anxiety, and with a couple little tricks that the teacher did teach me, I was able to go on. It was at a time, Kathy, when I had three different teachers, because they were preparing you for high school when you're going to have to move around. And two out of three of those teachers told my mother when she came in for parent teacher conference, these are their words: Patty does not have what your other two kids have. She will not succeed. She will be lucky to make it through high school, and you can forget about college. Those were the words. The third one, when my mom walked in, and she said, my mom was very, very kind and said, I understand you have something negative to tell me. I want to make this easier for you. And the teacher said, what are you talking about? And she told her what the other teachers said. And she says, that's completely untrue. She said, I think Patty is anxious. And so she said, with your permission, I would like to try a couple interventions and see if it can help her. And they were educationally bound. They were educational interventions, such as assigning me work earlier so I could do it at home where I was calm and quiet and I could think. And then I would come in, and then she would start that lesson with everybody else. And then my little hand would go up because I'd have an answer. And then I would be right. And guess what? I started blossoming. My grades went up. It became apparent that it was not in my ability. My problem was not in my ability. And I have to tell you, this is kind of a nice circle back. When I got my first college degree, I went back and talked and showed it to the teacher and talked to the teacher, and she was just overwhelmed. And when she retired, I was out of the country at the time she retired, but I sent her a card with a long letter telling her how I went on, got my master's, and what I was doing for a living. And her exact words back in the thank you card was, "I never doubted you for a minute." Yeah. So
That,
obviously
that's awesome. And
this,
it's wonderful to hear
yeah,
stories like that.
it impressed upon me greatly, as you can imagine, as to where I went in the direction of my career.
It changed your life.
It certainly did.
And
A-
teachers touch a lot of students like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's my little story. But I understand firsthand how miserable this feels and
Yeah.
how children feel hopeless and helpless, and parents as well. They don't know what to do as well. I would never hesitate to take a child to counseling. Obviously, I believe in it, or I wouldn't be doing it. But I think it's important that children have these skills early so they can develop and manifest and become a part of who they are, instead of the self-doubt and the negative self-talk becomes a part of who they are. They're going to have a chance. They're going to have a fighting chance against the stressors we know that are just getting bigger and bigger for our children with social media and all the expectations educationally that are coming about as well, that teachers talk about constantly, that there's lots of different things they have to achieve, the goals, and that they have to get these kids to a certain place where they're able to succeed with tests and assessments. And going into college was another difficult thing for me. And it took a lot of wherewithal to be able to go to class and go to a place that was completely different. And so, like I said,
That's
I'm doing my part
yeah,
to
that's a
help children.
common ailment for most of us. That
Hmm.
step to college.
Yeah.
Well, Patricia, our time is about up. We have learned so much in a short period of time. Um, please tell the viewers your upcoming events. I know people would love to come and get a book, and I've posted your links if anybody wants to get in touch with Patricia Miller.
Thank you.
Her website, pmwrites.com, pmwritescom at wordpress.com.
Yes.
And you can Google her and she'll come up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And her books are available on Amazon, in bookstores, and the children's book at headlinebooks.com. But tell us about your upcoming events, please.
Yeah, so this weekend, I'll be in Charleston, West Virginia at the West Virginia Book Fest. Where I'll have this and all the other books that I've written. I've got mystery collections, which I'm just going to quickly say another exciting piece of youth that gets to come into those is that I write the mysteries, and local artists, the young artists, middle grade and high school artists, then submit their sketches. So the sketches get chosen and are published in the book along with the mysteries. And then I have a sci-fi trilogy that I published a long time ago. And I've also contributed to several anthologies. So those will be there as well. But specifically to the children's book at the Dover Public Library, which is on Walnut Street in Dover, I'm going to be having two events there. I'll be doing a book presentation, which is also a launch and a book signing for this children's book on October 28th at 6 p.m. This is for adults so that I can introduce the book to adults and have a chance, like I did here, to explain the foundations beneath it and why it works and how it works. So that's October 28th at 6. And then I'll be doing a story time with the children on November 15th at 11 o'clock, also at Dover Public Library.
Well, that's great. Everybody's busy this time of year. And
Yes,
we will also be at the West Virginia Book Festival. So I look forward to seeing you there.
same here.
We want to thank everyone who's joined us on YouTube. And this video will also be posted on the Zoom into Books Facebook page and other social media sites. So we want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, Patricia. And
Thank
we
you.
will have you back to elaborate on this a little more. Thank you.
I would love to. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.